The greatest betrayal was not in what she took, but in what she left behind. This echoing silence. The sound was a low, guttural hum, a mechanical beast going through its morning ritual. My new Italian coffee maker, a sleek, chrome monument to my newfound wealth. It should have been a sound of comfort, of a day beginning with promise. But in the cavernous silence of my new kitchen, with its marble counters cold and unyielding under my fingertips, it was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. It was a sound that didn't belong to me. It was a sound from a life I had purchased but never truly moved into. I stood there, a woman in her late 50s, wrapped in a silk robe that felt as foreign as a costume, watching the dark liquid stream into the porcelain cup. The sun streamed through the massive bay window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, chaotic world. And in that pristine, perfect stillness, a thought, cold and sharp as a shard of glass, pierced the fragile bubble of my reality. I had lost my daughter, not to an accident, not to illness, but to the very fortune I had believed would secure her future. The money I had earned with my own two hands had become the weapon she used to redefine our relationship, to redraw the boundaries of her love until I was left standing on the outside, looking in at a stranger who wore my daughter's face. The greatest betrayal was not in what she took, but in what she left behind. This echoing silence, a palace built on the ruins of our past. Before the money, our life was painted in warmer, softer hues. Our world was the bakery, the rising bun. The name was my late husband's idea, a little piece of his optimism baked into the very foundation. It was a small, unassuming place, tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store, its front window always slightly fogged with the steam from the ovens. The air was thick with the scent of yeast, cinnamon, and sugar, a fragrance that clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin, a perfume of hard work and simple joys. My daughter, Anya, grew up within those flour-dusted walls. I can still see her so clearly, a small girl with flyaway hair and eyes the color of warm honey, perched on a tall stool by the counter. Her little legs would swing back and forth, not quite reaching the floor, as she concentrated on decorating sugar cookies with a child's fierce determination. A dab of red icing for a strawberry, a sprinkle of yellow for a star. Her laughter would ring out, a bright, clear bell above the dull roar of the industrial mixer. We were a team. After school, she'd do her homework at the small table in the back, the one with the wobbly leg I kept meaning to fix, surrounded by sacks of flour and the gentle, rhythmic thud of dough being kneaded. We lived in a small apartment above the bakery. It was cramped, with furniture that had seen better days, but it was filled with light and life. Our dinners were simple affairs, often eaten perched on stools, sharing stories of our day. I told her about difficult customers and baking disasters. She told me about schoolyard games and her dreams. She dreamed of being an artist, then a veterinarian, then a fashion designer. Her dreams were as changeable as the weather, and I loved every one of them. We didn't have much, but we had an abundance of love. It was a life built not on currency but on connection. The flower on my hands was a badge of honor, a testament to the life I was building for her. The change began not with a bang, but with a phone call. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Tuesdays were for baking sourdough. My hands were covered in a sticky, elastic dough when the phone rang. It was a representative from Amore Confections, a large national corporation. They had, through a circuitous route involving a food blogger and a local competition I'd almost forgotten entering, tasted my lavender and honey brioche. It was a recipe I'd been tinkering with for nearly a decade, a memory of my grandmother's garden given form. They wanted to buy the recipe, exclusively. The number they proposed was so vast, so abstract, it felt unreal. It was more money than I would have earned in 3 lifetimes of running the Rising Bun. I remember hanging up the phone, my dough-covered hand leaving a faint print on the receiver, and sinking onto a flour-dusted sack. I didn't cry or cheer. I was simply numb. This was the security I had prayed for during sleepless nights worrying about mortgage payments and Anya's college fund. It was the answer to a lifetime of quiet struggle. When I told Anya, her reaction was electric. "Mom, this is incredible," she shrieked, throwing her arms around me. "We're rich. We can finally live." There was a fervor in her eyes, a hunger I had never seen before. In that moment, a tiny, Almost imperceptible crack appeared in my heart. Finally live? I thought. I thought we were already living. The transformation was swift. The small apartment was exchanged for a modern, minimalist house that echoed with our footsteps. The comfortable, worn-out sofa was replaced by a stark white sectional that I was afraid to sit on. I bought Anya a new car for her graduation. I saw the way her eyes lit up at the brand logo, a different kind of light than the one that shone when she perfected a cookie design. Her circle of friends shifted. The old loyal friends from the neighborhood were gradually phased out, replaced by a new, glossier set she met at upscale cafes and clubs. She began speaking a new language, peppered with terms like portfolio, assets, and brand alignment. Her fiancé Mark appeared during this time. He was sleek and polished, a young financier with a firm handshake and eyes that seemed to calculate the net worth of everything they landed on, including me. He called me ma'am, with a deference that felt like judgment. I tried to talk to her, just once. We were in the new kitchen, and I mentioned one of her old friends, Sarah. Oh, her, Anya said, waving a dismissive hand. She's so stagnant. Still working at that little bookstore. No ambition. The word little was a dart. Everything from our old life was becoming little in her eyes. The bakery was quaint. Our old holidays were modest. Our life was being systematically downgraded in her personal ledger. The moral fault line was no longer a tiny crack. It was a chasm, and I stood on one side, clutching the memories of a life she was eager to forget, while she stood on the other, reaching for a future that had no room for my flour-dusted hands. The wedding planning was to be our new project, a bridge across the chasm that was widening between us. I envisioned it as a return to our old camaraderie, a chance to bond over fabric swatches and flower arrangements. I was naive. We were at a chic, overpriced cafe, the kind where the coffee had notes of things other than coffee. Anya was a whirlwind of energy, her tablet filled with spreadsheets and mood boards. It's all coming together, Mom, she said, her eyes sparkling with a hard, brilliant light. We've secured Kensington Manor. Do you know how impossible that is? It's the venue of the season. It sounds magnificent, sweetheart, I said, and I meant it. Her happiness was still my compass. I can't wait to see it. I've been thinking about the speeches, she continued, taking a delicate sip of her latte. Mark's father is, of course, going to give a wonderful, polished one. He's so well connected. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. And Mark's best man is hilarious. He'll really liven things up. I waited, a smile on my face, assuming my place in this lineup was a given. Then, her gaze flickered towards me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something else. Not hesitation, but calculation. The wedding planner, Celeste, she's just brilliant. She suggested that for the flow of the evening, and for the aesthetic of the photos, it might be best if the speeches are kept to a minimum. Just the father of the groom and the best man. The smile froze on my face. The noise of the cafe seemed to recede into a dull roar. Oh, I said, the single syllable feeling inadequate. Anya leaned forward, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper that felt more condescending than confidential. It's not that we don't want you to speak, Mom. It's just your stories. You know, the ones about the bakery, about me as a kid with flour on my nose. They're a little simple for this crowd. Celeste says cohesion is key. We want it to feel elevated, you know? Sophisticated. Simple. The word landed like a physical blow. It was the final verdict on our entire past. The late nights, the struggles, the laughter, the love, all of it was now simple. Unworthy of this elevated new world she was building. I looked at my daughter, at the perfect, manicured hand she laid on my arm, and I saw a strategist, not a bride. She wasn't excluding me. She was curating me, editing me out of the narrative of her new life. I felt a hot prickle behind my eyes, but I refused to let the tears fall. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain, of having it become another piece of data in her social calculation. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, the ice clinking softly in the glass, a tiny, chaotic sound in the stifling stillness that had fallen between us. Of course, Anya, I heard myself say, my voice strangely calm and distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Whatever is best for the flow. I nodded, the movement stiff and unnatural. She beamed, the tension draining from her shoulders, clearly believing she had handled a delicate situation with grace. I knew you'd understand, Mom. You're the best. But I didn't understand. As I sat there, watching her return to her color-coded spreadsheet, I knew a line had been irrevocably crossed. The chasm was no longer between us, it was inside me, and I was falling into it. The turning point wasn't a dramatic scene. It was this quiet, polite annihilation at a cafe table, where my history was sacrificed for the sake of a wedding photographer. Anya leaned forward, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper that felt more condescending than confidential. It's not that we don't want you to speak, Mom. It's just your stories. You know, the ones about the bakery, about me as a kid with flour on my nose. They're a little simple for this crowd. Celeste says cohesion is key. We want it to feel elevated, you know? Sophisticated. Simple. The word landed like a physical blow. It was the final verdict on our entire past. The late nights, the struggles, the laughter, the love, all of it was now simple. Unworthy of this elevated new world she was building. I looked at my daughter, at the perfect, manicured hand she laid on my arm, and I saw a strategist, not a bride. She wasn't excluding me. She was curating me, editing me out of the narrative of her new life. I felt a hot prickle behind my eyes, but I refused to let the tears fall. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain, of having it become another piece of data in her social calculation. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, the ice clinking softly in the glass, a tiny, chaotic sound in the stifling stillness that had fallen between us. Of course, Anya, I heard myself say, my voice strangely calm and distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Whatever is best for the flow. I nodded, the movement stiff and unnatural. She beamed, the tension draining from her shoulders, clearly believing she had handled a delicate situation with grace. I knew you'd understand, Mom. You're the best. But I didn't understand. As I sat there, watching her return to her color-coded spreadsheet, I knew a line had been irrevocably crossed. The chasm was no longer between us, it was inside me, and I was falling into it. The turning point wasn't a dramatic scene. It was this quiet, polite annihilation at a cafe table, where my history was sacrificed for the sake of a wedding photographer's aesthetic. The wedding speech was merely the first thread pulled, and the entire tapestry of our relationship began to unravel with a quiet, relentless speed. The incidents that followed were like a series of small, precise cuts, each one deepening the wound, each one teaching me a new, painful lesson about the person my daughter was becoming. The first cut was financial. A few weeks after the cafe incident, my phone buzzed insistently on my bedside table. It was my bank's fraud department. A transaction for over $80,000 had been flagged, a payment to a luxury car dealership. My breath hitched. I had given Anya a supplementary credit card a year ago, after the money came in for emergencies. A flat tire, a medical bill, something unexpected. A cherry red sports car did not qualify. My hands trembled as I dialed her number. Anya, the bank just called. There's a charge for a car. Her sigh was long-suffering, a puff of static filled with impatience. Oh, that. Yes, Mom. It's the new Avellini. It's gorgeous. I put a deposit down. $80,000 is more than a deposit, Anya, I said, trying to keep my voice level. We didn't discuss this. That's an enormous amount of money. Mom, please relax, she chided, her tone implying I was worrying about a broken vase, not a life-altering sum. You have the money now. What's the point of having it if we don't enjoy it? It's just a car. You need to stop being so frugal. She spat the word out as if it were a curse. Frugal. The word that had once meant survival, prudence, care, was now a character flaw in her eyes. The call ended with her promising to handle the paperwork, leaving me feeling not like a mother, but like a recalcitrant accountant. The final, deepest cut was the erosion of my very presence in her life. The invitations to casual lunches stopped. Our weekly phone calls became brief, perfunctory check-ins. When I was invited to their new, sprawling apartment, I felt like a guest on a museum tour. Don't touch that, Mom. It's a limited edition sculpture. Be careful with that glass, it's Venetian. I was a bull in a china shop, my very presence a threat to her carefully curated world. The loneliness was a physical presence, a heavy cloak I wore everywhere. I started eating dinner alone in the vast, formal dining room, at a table that could seat 12. The clink of my silverware against the fine china was the only conversation. I missed the wobbly table in our old apartment. I missed the smell of flour and sugar. I missed the sound of Anya's real laughter, not the polished, social tinkle she used now. I tried to bridge the gap. I invited her to the bakery, to bake our old favorite, the lemon poppy seed muffins, just for old time's sake. She looked at me with something close to pity. "Mom, I have a spin class, and then a meeting with the wedding planner. I don't really have time for baking." That night, I went to the bakery alone. It was after hours, dark and silent. I sat at the old wobbly table and finally let the tears come. They were quiet, hopeless tears that fell onto the flour-dusted wood. The money had built a beautiful, gilded cage. I had everything I was supposed to want, and I had never been more impoverished. My own daughter, the center of my universe, had become my jailer, and the price of my freedom was the very love I had thought was unshakable. The silence in the big house became a thing I could feel, a thick, velvety pressure against my eardrums. It was a week after the failed muffin invitation, and a deep, restless melancholy had settled over me. I found myself wandering into Anya's old room. She hadn't properly lived in it for over a year, but she still kept some of her things here, old books, childhood memorabilia she hadn't deemed worthy of her new, minimalist apartment. I was looking for a specific photo album, the one from her 10th birthday, the one where she'd worn a purple dress and had chocolate cake smeared from ear to ear. I needed to see that face, the one that was wholly and unconditionally mine. The room was tidy, sterile almost. And there, on the pristine white desk, her laptop was open, its screen dark but for a single blinking green light, indicating it was asleep. A dangerous, desperate thought entered my mind. I knew it was a violation. I knew it was wrong. But the chasm of loneliness inside me screamed louder than my conscience. I had to know. Was I going crazy? Was I just an old woman, unable to let go, misinterpreting ambition for malice? I touched the trackpad. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dim room. It was open to a messaging app. And there, at the top of the list, was a conversation with Mark. The preview of the most recent message made my blood run cold. "Mark, is your mom finally ready to sign over the bakery?" My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. With a trembling finger, I clicked on the thread. The entire history loaded. I started scrolling, my eyes scanning the text, each line a fresh puncture wound. Anya. She's being sentimental. But she'll agree. She always does. We just have to keep pushing the less stress angle. Mark. Once the bakery is legally in our name, we can sell the property. That land in that neighborhood is worth a fortune now. The bakery itself is practically worthless. Worthless. The word glared from the screen, a brutal final judgment on my life's work. I kept scrolling, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Anya. And the rest of her money? The trust? Mark, it's rock solid? Anya, don't worry. I'm her only family. It will all come to me eventually. It's not like she knows what to do with it. She'd probably just donate it to some stray cat shelter or something. We need to be smart about this. The conversation continued, a cold, clinical dissection of my assets, my life, my very nature. They discussed timelines, legal strategies for having me declared unable to manage my affairs if I proved too difficult. They talked about my house, my investments, all of it as if it were already theirs, and I was merely an inconvenient placeholder. I stumbled back from the desk, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a sob. This wasn't just greed. This was a conspiracy. This was a calculated, long-term plan for my eventual erasure. The truth did not feel like a shock. It felt like a confirmation. It was a quiet, freezing tide washing over me, numbing the pain of the 1,000 cuts and replacing it with a profound, glacial clarity. The daughter I had raised was gone. In her place was a partner in a hostile takeover, and I was the company they were trying to acquire. The power balance shifted in that moment. They thought they were the strategists, but they had just revealed their entire playbook. And I was no longer a sentimental old woman. The numbness lasted through the night. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark of my bedroom, the ghostly blue light of the moon washing over me. The initial, searing pain had been cauterized by a cold, focused rage. But it wasn't a rage that demanded shouting or confrontation. It was a quiet, determined fire that burned away the last vestiges of my denial. I would not be managed. I would not be liquidated. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called my lawyer, Eleanor Grant. Eleanor was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had handled the initial contract with Amore Confections and had known me for 20 years. "Eleanor," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I need to see you. It's urgent. It's about Anya." An hour later, I was seated in her oak-paneled office, a cup of untouched tea cooling before me. I told her everything, not with hysterics, but with the detached precision of a reporter. The wedding speech, the car, the franchise plan, and finally, the messages on the laptop. I showed her the photos I had taken with my phone. Eleanor listened, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, she removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Irene," she said softly, "I am so sorry." "Don't be sorry, Eleanor," I replied, my hands folded neatly in my lap. "Be thorough. I want to make sure that the Rising Bun, my house, and every cent I have is protected from this liquidation plan." We got to work. It was a quiet, methodical process, my form of fighting back. There would be no screaming matches, no dramatic scenes. Just paperwork, the most powerful weapon in the modern world. First, we addressed the bakery. Eleanor helped me place it into an irrevocable trust. The legal language was complex, but the bottom line was simple. The Rising Bun could never be sold. It was protected in perpetuity. I would retain all profits and full operational control for the rest of my life. Upon my passing, the bakery and its assets would not go to Anya. They would transfer to a newly created foundation, the Rising Tide Foundation, which would provide grants and mentorship to single mothers looking to start their own small businesses. It would be my legacy, a monument to hard work, not a real estate transaction. Next, we dismantled their financial roadmap. The bulk of my wealth from the recipe sale was moved into a separate, charitable trust. I would live comfortably off the interest, but the principal was untouchable, destined for charities supporting women and children. Anya's inheritance was restructured. The vague promise of everything was replaced by a concrete, legal document stipulating a modest, monthly allowance. It was enough to cover reasonable living expenses, but it would not fund a single luxury handbag or sports car payment. It was no longer a windfall, it was a salary for being my daughter, and it came with no strings, but also no room for greed. Finally, I went to the hardware store. I bought new, high-security locks for every door in my house. The act of unscrewing the old, familiar locks and replacing them with new, shiny, impenetrable ones was deeply cathartic. It was a physical manifestation of the boundary I was building. Each turn of the screwdriver was a silent declaration. "You are no longer welcome to take what is mine." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a profound and weary sadness. But beneath the sadness was a core of steel I didn't know I still possessed. I had looked into the abyss of my daughter's betrayal. And instead of falling in, I had built a bridge across it. A bridge she was no longer permitted to cross. The plan was set. The trap was not of my making, but I was the one who would spring it. And I would do it with the quiet dignity of a woman who had finally learned to value herself. The confrontation arrived exactly 2 weeks later, right on schedule. Anya and Mark swept into my house without knocking, their faces a mask of confident purpose. They found me in the kitchen, calmly reading a book, the afternoon sun casting long, golden shadows across the floor. "Mom," Anya began, barely containing her excitement. She placed the familiar leather-bound portfolio on the counter with a definitive thud. "We've done it. We've secured investors for the first 3 franchise locations. It's all systems go. We just need you to sign the transfer papers." She slid a document across the marble towards me. It was titled Asset Transfer and Management Agreement. I closed my book slowly, marking my page with a cloth bookmark. I looked at the paper, then at their expectant, almost giddy faces. I could see the future they envisioned flashing in their eyes. The sale of the land, the influx of cash, the liberation from my sentimental hold on their ambitions. I didn't touch the document. I simply looked at Anya, my gaze steady. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it echoed in the spacious room with the force of a gunshot. There was a beat of stunned silence. Mark recovered first, his smile tightening. "I'm sorry, ma'am, what was that?" I said no. I repeated, enunciating each word clearly. "I am not signing anything. The bakery is not being franchised. It is not being sold. It is mine." Anya's face contorted from confusion to irritation. "Mom, don't be difficult. This is a huge opportunity. We've been over this. You're not thinking clearly." "Oh, I am thinking more clearly than I have in years," I said, my tone still calm. "I know all about your plan. I know you think the bakery is worthless, and the land is worth a fortune. I know you see my entire life as an asset to be liquidated." The color drained from Anya's face. "What are you talking about?" "I read your messages, Anya. On your laptop. The one you left open in your old room. The one where you and Mark discussed how to handle me, how to get my money, how I don't know what to do with it." The silence that followed was absolute. Mark looked like he'd been struck. Anya's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The carefully constructed facade of the concerned daughter and future son-in-law crumbled into dust, revealing the avaricious strategist beneath. "You had no right," Anya finally shrieked, her voice cracking with a fury that was pure, undiluted panic. "That was private. What you were planning was a hostile takeover of my life," I countered, my voice rising for the first time, not in hysteria, but in righteous conviction. "You betrayed me, not with a single act, but with a cold, calculated conspiracy. Well, it's over." I stood up, walking to the kitchen drawer where I kept my copies of the new legal documents. I placed them on the counter next to their franchise plan. "The bakery is in a trust. It can never be sold. My money is in a trust. You will receive a monthly allowance, enough to live on but not enough for this." I gestured around my large kitchen, at them, at their expensive clothes. "The rest will go to people who actually need it, to women who understand the value of something beyond a price tag." The look on Anya's face was a chaotic masterpiece of emotions. Shock, fury, a dawning horror, and the terrifying realization that her golden goose had not only flown the coop, but had also hired a team of lawyers. It was the culmination of every selfish choice, every condescending word, every act of betrayal. She stared at me, not as her mother, but as an adversary who had just checkmated her. There was no satisfaction in it. No victory. Just the hollow, echoing finality of a door slamming shut forever. The climax wasn't an explosion. It was an implosion, the collapse of a world built on sand, and the quiet, unyielding strength of the rock that remained. They left that day in a storm of slammed doors and hissed threats about lawyers of their own. The silence they left behind was different this time. It wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. It was my silence reclaimed. I went back to the Rising Bun the next morning. I put on my old flower-streaked apron, the one with the slightly frayed edges. I punched down the sourdough starter with my bare hands, feeling the familiar, living texture of it. The bell above the door jingled, and my regulars came in. They asked for their usual orders, they shared bits of neighborhood gossip. I was home. Months passed. The first allowance check was cashed. There was no thank you, no communication. Then a few months later, a terse email arrived. It was about a change of address for the allowance. That was it. We see each other now, perhaps once or twice a year, for a strained, formal lunch. We talk about the weather, about superficial current events. The conversation is a minefield we both carefully navigate. The relationship we had is a ghost, a memory I have learned to live with. I had to mourn the daughter I thought I had, to make space for the woman she chose to become. It was a grief as real as any death, perhaps more profound because it was accompanied by the ghost of her presence in the world. But in letting go of that old dream, I found a new purpose. The Rising Tide Foundation is now my passion. I meet with the mothers we support, I hear their stories, I see the same fire in their eyes that I once had. In helping them, I am healing myself. The money did not bring me happiness, but it did bring me clarity. It showed me the true character of the people around me, for better and for worse. I learned that wealth is not a blessing or a curse. It is a revealer. It holds up a mirror, and sometimes, the reflection it shows you is the last thing you ever wanted to see. I learned that the highest price of my fortune was not what I paid for it with my labor, but what I lost to it in my heart. And yet, from that loss, I gained an unshakable understanding of my own worth, a value that no dollar amount could ever define. This real-life story of family, betrayal, and quiet strength was a difficult one to tell. If it moved you, or if you have ever faced a similar crossroads, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support through a like or a subscription helps our channel bring more calm, reflective stories like this one into the world. Thank you for listening.